There is a man standing in a parking lot in Ohio. He just spent $72,000 on a truck he will never take off-road. The bed has never carried anything heavier than a bag of groceries. But when he sits behind that wheel, something shifts inside him. Something feels right. And the question worth asking is why. This is not a video about trucks. This is a video about identity, about a generation that grew up feeling overlooked, and about why a piece of machinery became one of the most powerful psychological symbols of the modern age. Generation X, born between 1965 and 1980, sandwiched between the celebrated baby boomers and the endlessly discussed millennials. They were called the forgotten generation for a reason, and that label did something to them, something quiet, something deep, something that still shows up in their buying habits, their values, and yes, their driveways. To understand the truck obsession, you have to understand what Gen X actually lived through. They were the first generation of latchkey kids. Many came home to empty houses because both parents were working. There was no helicopter parenting, no constant reassurance. They were handed independence early, sometimes too early. And in that independence, they developed a fierce sense of self-reliance. The pickup truck, more than almost any other object in American culture, is the physical symbol of exactly that: self-reliance, capability, the idea that you do not need anyone to come rescue you. Dr. Kit Yarrow, a consumer psychologist who has studied generational buying behavior extensively, found that Gen X consumers tend to make purchasing decisions based on authenticity and personal values far more than other generations. They are not buying what is trendy, they are buying what feels true to who they are. And for a significant portion of Gen X men in particular, a truck feels deeply personally true. Now think about the media landscape they grew up in. The 1970s and 1980s were filled with rugged, capable, no-nonsense male figures. Characters who fixed things with their hands. Characters who drove through dust and mud and came out stronger. Films, television shows, and country music all painted the same portrait: the capable man, the independent man, the man who needed very little but could handle everything. The pickup truck was always in that picture, always parked in the background, always part of the story. Young Gen X boys absorbed that imagery at a formative age, and it embedded itself into their psychological blueprint of what strength looks like. There's a concept in psychology called the extended self. It was introduced by consumer behavior researcher Russell Belk in 1988. The theory is straightforward but profound. The objects people own are not just things. They become extensions of who people are and who they want to be. When someone buys a truck, they are not just buying transportation. They are buying a version of themselves, a capable version, a stronger, more independent, more trustworthy version. And Gen X, a generation that spent its formative years quietly proving it could handle things alone, connects to that version of themselves with unusual intensity. Here's something interesting. Pickup truck sales in the United States have been staggeringly consistent for decades. The Ford F-Series has been the best-selling vehicle in America for over 40 consecutive years, and the average age of a new full-size truck buyer has hovered around the late 40s to mid-50s, squarely in Gen X territory. These are not people buying trucks because they need them for work. Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that the majority of new truck buyers are not in trades or agriculture. They are office workers, managers, and professionals. So the purchase is almost entirely psychological. Think about that for a moment. Tens of thousands of dollars spent on a vehicle for what it represents rather than what it does. That is not irrationality. That is the power of identity-driven purchasing. There is also the factor of status, but not status in the way most people think about it. Gen X has a complicated relationship with wealth display. Unlike some generations, they tend to be uncomfortable with overt luxury signaling. A sports car or a designer watch can feel pretentious to many Gen X sensibilities. But a truck? A truck feels earned. A truck says hard work. It says capability. It says that the person behind the wheel is someone who gets things done. It's status disguised as practicality. And that disguise is perfect for a generation that values grit over glamour. Researchers at the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute published findings showing that truck buyers consistently score higher in traits like personal agency, self-sufficiency, and a preference for physical capability as a marker of personal worth. These are the exact psychological fingerprints of a generation raised to figure things out on their own. Now add nostalgia into this picture. Nostalgia is one of the most powerful psychological forces in consumer behavior. Studies published in the Journal of Consumer Research have shown that nostalgia increases a person's sense of belonging, boosts self-continuity, and makes people feel more connected to their own identity. For Gen X, the pickup truck carries enormous nostalgic weight. It might be the truck their father drove. It might be the truck they remember from a road trip in childhood. It might be the vehicle that appeared in the first movie that made them feel something. When they buy that truck, they are not just buying metal and rubber. They are buying a feeling from the past, a feeling of safety, of competence, of home.
A therapist in Texas, who works primarily with men in their late 40s and 50s, described something she sees regularly in her practice. Her male clients, most of them Gen X, often talk about feeling like the world has moved too fast, like the rules changed without anyone asking them, like the things they were raised to value, hard work, quiet strength, practical skill, are no longer celebrated the way they once were. For these men, the truck is an anchor. It connects them to a value system that still feels solid when many other things feel uncertain. That is a deeply human thing. When the world feels like it is shifting beneath your feet, people reach for symbols of stability. And for Gen X men in particular, that symbol has 4 wheels, a powerful engine, and a truck bed that says, whatever happens, this person is ready. Marketing has understood this psychology for decades. Truck advertisements almost never show trucks in traffic. They show trucks climbing mountains, crossing rivers, hauling enormous loads through impossible terrain. The trucks in these ads are doing things the average buyer will never do, but that does not matter, because the ad is not selling a vehicle, it is selling a feeling of capability. It is whispering to something deep in the Gen X psyche, this is who you are. This is what you are built for. Ford's famous advertising line, "Built Ford Tough," is not a description of a truck, it is a description of the person who drives it. And Gen X hears that and feels recognized in a way that still touches something real. There is one more dimension worth exploring. The pickup truck has also become a quiet symbol of a certain kind of cultural resistance. As cities grew, as remote work spread, as the world became increasingly digital and abstract, the truck stood for the opposite of all that. It stood for the physical, the tangible, the real. For Gen X, a generation that existed before the internet changed everything, that remembers a world of physical work and physical presence, the truck is a way of holding on to something concrete in an increasingly intangible world. And maybe that is the deepest psychological truth in all of this. The truck is not about the truck. It never really was. It's about a generation quietly declaring, this is who we are. We are capable. We are self-reliant. We don't need much, but what we have means something, and we built it ourselves. The next time a pickup truck rolls past, consider what it might actually be carrying, not in the bed, but in the mind of the person behind the wheel. Because sometimes the heaviest thing a vehicle carries is everything its driver needs the world to know about them, without ever having to say a single word.